Welcome back to the CITIUS Mag podcast. I'm Chris Chavez.
I'm Kyle Merber.
And I'm David Melly.
On today's show, let's see what we've got. It's like it's indoor track season in full swing. But first, we had some records fall and some really close finishes at the Houston half and full marathon. The NCAA collegiate season heated up with some fantastic sprint performances that are putting all-time lists and records on watch. Marc Scott is on the move to Kenya, a little bit more Millrose hype because we can't get enough of it. And why not some USATF Cross Country Championship preview towards the tail end of this before we hit our buy or sell segment. But first, Olipop. Any close calls this week, Kyle, when it comes to your life and Olipop saving the day?
I didn't faint this week, but like 6 people I know, I think this week alone, text me to let me know that they used our code CITIUS25 and bought some Olipop. So thanks for supporting.
Yeah. So for the people who may not be as familiar, Olipop is a prebiotic soda with only 2 to 5 grams of sugar that is actually good for your gut health, and it's delicious. Use code CITIUS25 for 25% off non-subscription orders. Learn more at drinkolipop.com or use the link in the description and our promotional code for the discount. So that is Olipop. We'll have some more on the show. I ran out. And, hand up, that's my mistake. I should have bought some before we sat down for this podcast.
That's not a mistake. That's an endorsement. You ran out. You drank it all.
I have to go get some more.
I haven't tried grape. Is that crazy? Because I feel like I would love grape soda.
See, I'm not a big grape soda guy, so I haven't tried that one. I've been solely, if I see tropical punch, I'm going for it. And I did catch
punch.
Yeah, tropical
punch. I want
to
wait till the summer. I want to make a Olipop root beer float. That's what I want to do.
Well, they have root beer flavor for it too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Apparently most popular, I heard.
Yeah. It's also available
at
it's available at Whole Foods, Target, HEB. Go check it out. But of course, if you're buying it online, use code CITIUS25. Okay, let's get into Houston. The Houston Marathon and Half Marathon were held this past weekend. Both events featured some impressive performances. In the half, USA's Emily Sisson set a new American record, finishing second in 1:06:52, becoming the first American woman to break the 67-minute barrier on a record-eligible course. Ethiopian runner Hiwot Gebremariam won the half marathon with a time of 1:06:28. On the men's side, it was an Ethiopian sweep because the little Gebre Selassie Aleme won in 60 minutes and 34 seconds, just barely edging out Wesley Kiptoo by less than a second. In the marathon, Kenya's Dominic Ondoro won in 2:10:36, the closest finish in Houston since 1996, since he outleaned Tedsdat Ayana of Ethiopia. And on the women's marathon side, Japanese runner Hitomi Nia won in 2:19:24, more than 6 minutes ahead of the second place finisher, and oh so close to the Japanese national record. So I guess we're obviously going to start with Emily Sisson because our American bias shows, but
yes, we definitely are American bias. But before we even dive in there, and David, you might, as our resident road racer here, might have the best opinion in this. Do we like 66:52 or 1:06:52?
I was debating this all weekend, but I want to hear David's take.
Under 70 is you start with the 66, and then you're getting into your 111s, 112s. Like,
wow. I like that. It makes no sense, but it feels right.
I personally go with the 1:06 on graphics because if we're thinking to the general mass population, like 66 minutes doesn't sound like you have to mentally do that simple math. But if you're just like 1 hour and 6 minutes for the half marathon, like it pops more. And so that's why I went with that in the graphic. So in the newsletter, I think kind of there might be some inconsistencies, but that's fine. But regardless, Emily Sisson did her thing. She's always went to like downplay, like whether or not she's going for the record before in the press conferences and in any sort of interview, but she shows up on race day, gets the job done, and shaves 19 seconds off her own record. Surprised?
No, I don't think anyone is surprised. First off, this sort of feels like Mondo beating his own world record in the pole vault by like a half inch at a time, because When you already have the record, then there's definitely no surprise. But this one specifically, I mean, she said it after the race. She's not in as good a shape as she was in Chicago. And I don't think 66 high is equivalent to 218. I don't think, I haven't looked at the charts, but it doesn't feel equivalent. And it's something that we know that she was capable of. It's nice to check the box and get it done. It's, obviously faster than any other American has ever done. But the biggest thing for me is that we no longer have that weird asterisk next to the Carragoucher time from the Great North Run.
In 2007, yeah.
In 2007, it wasn't a record eligible course. And so whenever it's like, oh, the fastest times in American history, like you always had to deal with that. And it cleans it up.
Yeah. And I feel like people forget that she got really close. I want to say 2018 or 2019 at the New York half. She was like 2 or 3 seconds off what was then Molly Huddle's record at the time, running like 67:20 something. And so, we think about, since Chicago, it's such a foregone conclusion that she would get the record, and she's already the record holder, but she's been a American record caliber runner for the last almost 5 yees at this point, so it's not surprising at all, for sure.
So just today I published an episode
that we like. Doesn't that kind of, Chris, let me stop you real quick. Like that you break an American record and then we come on this podcast and we're like, yeah, knew it. No one cares, we're not impressed, we knew it, we knew you were so good. Like, in one way that sucks, but on the other side, it's like, it's pretty cool that Emily is now at that level, that the expectation is whenever she runs a race that she's going to break the American record.
I think what would make it fun is if someone else took another crack and like took it down another second. And like, if all of a sudden we did have two people kind of trading it on and off, but I guess I did like the Mondo comparison where it's sort of like, now she's just cashing checks. Like, let's make a call to our friends over at New Balance and find out just how much her American record bonus is, because I'm sure, she just keeps racking them up. And in this race in particular, I think she got 3 of them because she like hit the, whatever it might've been, like the 10 mile, the 20K mark. So a good day's work for Emily Sisson, who now owns 4 of the top 6 times ever on the U.S. half marathon performance list. She went out at 5 flat pace, and then from there kind of dipped into the 5:05s, 5:10s before closing hard again in 5:03. So once again, strong performance by her. Again, kudos to the Ethiopian athlete who won, because it's, I guess part of the reason why Emily Sisson says that she was able to run that fast is because she knew historically Houston was won in a time that is faster than the American record. So if she was able to chase this woman down, then she was going to be able to run a fast time. And so while we may say that we're not surprised, it's interesting because I did put out an episode of the podcast today with Molly Huddle, and she said she was surprised because in the weeks leading up to it, like Ray Tracy, maybe if we go back a couple more weeks, it wasn't the perfect buildup, but give it some time, and Ray kind of predicted to a T what Emily would run. And they'd been just that whole training group with Molly and Emily and Ray. They've been talking about 67 minutes for the longest time. And so now this is totally a weight off their shoulders. So, what grade would we give? Let's give some grades out for the Houston half marathon performances. Kyle, what would you grade Emily's performance?
For Emily specifically?
Yes.
All right, you're putting me in a tough position because I think on the surface, it's like obviously great. It's the American best and everything. Compared to 218, it's not quite there. And compared to the global, all-time list, it's still quite a ways away from 62 minutes and Gidey's ability. But I think from where she is right now, and I think she made a great point after the race, is that the way that American half marathoners approach the half, and it's not the focus. Like, it's the fastest half that we run in the US is in Houston, and it's January. Most people are coming off of a really short buildup after the fall. So if I have to give a grade, as far as Americans all time, I'm going to give it an A+. As far as Emily herself, I'm going to give it a B. Like, it was good, but I think Emily can break 66? 100%. And I think she would agree with me.
Yeah, I was going to be a little nicer than Kyle and give her like a B plus A minus, but I will say she went out hot, and when she super patiently negative split that American record at Chicago, like that to me was the most impressive part about that run, was her having the confidence and poise to run that race like that. And I feel like, all things the same, if she just ran a little better tactically, like she's 66-30-ish, contending for the win too. Like that would have been cool to see. So, there was definitely room for improvement even on the day and in the fitness that she was in.
Just think of the timeline though. Like if you take a couple of weeks off after Chicago, get back into it, you're enjoying.
Oh, it's a super short turnaround for sure.
It's a really quick turnaround. So when I say B, like I know it shouldn't be tough, but like it sounds tough, but it's only because I know that if it was ever the focus of an entire buildup, I think she would run low 65s. Like I think she got in a Valencia half, like she is smashing this.
I ran the Houston half last year, and the absolute worst part of running the Houston half is that you're doing your hardest workouts like in the week between Christmas and New Year's. So the discipline that takes is commendable, to say the least.
All right, so rapid fire, I guess grades wise, Hiwat Gebremariam will give it an A. You come away with the win. Fantastic. On the men's side, we had Luel Gebrselassie kind of making a nice sneaky pass on Wesley Kiptoo in the final 50 meters. Now, it's been the subject of some sort of controversy, at least online on Twitter, from what I've seen. Fair or foul? Wesley Kiptoo just zigzagging kind of in the last stretch there to hold off Gebrselassie. What do you guys think?
Look, we love NAZ Elite. We love Wesley Kiptoo. You can't do that. You're not allowed. You can't physically prevent someone from passing you. So as I actually think that if Kiptoo would have just focused on running to the line as fast as he can, that he would have run away with it. But, the way things shook out, I think coming in second and not being DQ'd after winning the race is probably best case scenario.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm with Kyle on that one.
I wanted you to take the contrarian approach, but I
worse, more flagrant versions of that. And I think people would be a lot more angry if he had won. I will say, shout out, I was doing the research for the CITIUS newsletter. I'm pretty sure that's the fastest half marathon ever run in a pair of Hokas. Listeners, correct me if I'm wrong. So he gets credit for that. Going back to the grading, I would say Gebrselassie gets an A, not just for winning, but he was keeping the pace pretty honest throughout the race. He was one of the guys making moves pretty much from halfway onward. So not only did he come out with a win, I feel like he did earn it in the middle miles for sure.
B+. Gebrselassie a stud. He's
London Marathon runner-up. Yeah.
Yeah, London and Rotterdam runner-up. He's run 2:04, I think, on at least a couple occasions. So I can't give him an A- or an A if he's not breaking 60. Sorry, he's too good.
Fair enough.
B+
and then Kiptoo, no grade, sent to detention.
Kiptoo has a see me after class.
Yeah.
The biggest thing we should be talking about with Kiptoo is where is hat and gloves on the first actual cool day. We've got no cover up.
He ditched him. He was wearing them early and then he ditched him somewhere on the course.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty badass. So
gloves are
no, it was interesting. You've seen this guy wearing gloves indoors before. So, but Kiptoo showing serious promise on the roads right now.
On the men's half marathon side, we also had, in the build up to this, we talked a big game about Connor Manson, Edward Cheswick giving 60 minutes a scare. It didn't end up happening for anyone, but in particular, not their best days out there. David, I think you had some thoughts on Connor Manson's performance.
Every time I've seen him race, and I'm sure there's some race somewhere, some early season cross country race that I didn't watch, but he's never, he doesn't strike me as a patient runner. He'll always be the first guy to make a move, and I want him to be the last guy to make a move. He's a super talented runner, clearly super gritty. his performance in Chicago showed that he has the capability of being, you know, a world-class marathoner. But like, I just feel like if you're like, he started pushing the pace like 6-7 miles in, and then as soon as the real racing happened, he gets like spat out the back. And it's just like, if you're not confident that you can bust the thing wide open with a move that early, and you know what's essentially like almost a championship style race, like I feel like he's got some room for improvement tactically. I might give him a C for that, because I would love to see what he could do if he just like waited a little longer.
It's interesting because I remember having a poster of a guy who ran very similarly in my room growing up. His name was Steve Prefontaine.
Yeah, and how many medals did that guy end up with?
He's had some movies made about him, so that's pretty sick. I mean, I think Mans had that turnaround after Chicago to then go to Manchester and crush it. And it didn't make any sense to me how quickly he turned around there. And I just think, you know, guessing this isn't like the number one thing that was circled on his calendar either, but he's just, if this is his okay race, then I still am buying for Mans all the way to the Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure this is, you know, very much like you've done a couple workouts before you get into the real meat of Boston training for him. So I definitely don't think you know, there was a full display of his capabilities at a half marathon. I just, in a race like Olympic trials though, like tactics matter. So I don't know if I'm buying all the way to the Olympics. I want him to prove me wrong.
I'm a little disappointed he chose this over US Cross, because like he would have been fantastic for the World Cross team. So I'll join you guys in giving him, you know, a lower grade like that. On Chesrick's side, I don't know, just didn't seem like it was his day. Not overly concerned. I'm, you know, with seeing the Boston Marathon fields, I'm still kind of like waiting, like when's he even gonna make the move up? Like he had that fantastic half in New York last year, and so like many people, you know, Ed Ches is still regarded like super high, and so I'd love to see him give the full marathon distance a try, but we're gonna have to continue to wait.
One more. I want to see him back on the track.
Really?
I want to see him in like some fast 10Ks. Which
it's tough because he's still like, you know, the whole citizenship thing has been like a question around him for the longest time, and I think he finally decided he's just gonna have to compete for Kenya because he's losing the prime of his career, waiting in limbo, but to try and represent the United States. And he would have a good shot at making a U.S. team on the track, but maybe less so for Kenya. But other kudos I wanted to give, of course, strong performance by Molly Huddle running 1:10:01, so close to breaking 70 in her first high performance, I think, race since coming back from having a baby just 9 months ago. So I put out a podcast episode with her before this, so people can go check out and learn more about that performance. I think she even gave it a grade, and it was like A-. So strong performance by her.
Can you give a shout out to the men's marathon winner, Dominic Ondoro, the 2017 champion? And he's kind of pulled, I've theorized this idea before of like, what if your entire career was just winning mid majors? And he's like embodying that.
Because he's got grandmas, he's got Twin Cities, he's got Houston,
he's got Helsinki, he's got Melbourne. Like, he doesn't run any of the majors, but he cleans up on these like mids, and
pretty good payday.
Winning all Houston. Around. Yeah, it pays 30. It pays 30 grand. Like, it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
You know who I think like flew super under the radar, but definitely deserves like an A or an A+ is Tristan Van Ord in the full marathon
on the women's side. Yeah.
She ran 2:27. It was like a 2.5 minute PB on a day when like the conditions, I think, especially for the full, because it got warm kind of in that second hour of the racing. You know, they weren't great for running really fast, and she, you know, I wouldn't say is totally in like the top of the names for favorites for trials, but like she's putting her nose in there for being a contender.
Just really quick, Jenny Simpson and Erica Kemp, 2 names to potentially watch in the lead up to the U.S. Olympic marathon trials when it comes to just notching the qualifier now. They still haven't tested the full distance, but for Jenny, it's particularly a great storyline that I could see NBC attaching itself to, where it's sort of the hometown marathon, hometown hero. We'll see what happens if she decides to give it a go beforehand. But again, a thing to remember for a lot of these people, the marathon opportunities are running out before it gets really close to the trials. So we might see some late spring, maybe some grandma's marathons here and there before, and the early fall ones would be the last final option before finally getting a chance to focus and buckle down on the trials. So that's enough.
I gotta say, before we move on from Houston, it's just like, if you're going to be a real contender to make the team, like, you should be able to bang out a half whenever. So, maybe there's somebody who's like a total dark horse who doesn't have the qualifier now and gets it in a full, but like all of the major players can get it, essentially in their build up to trials.
All right. Now let's move back to the track. We've got some scorching times to talk about from the collegiate scene. First up, we've got Britton Wilson in the 600 meters, who finished runner-up to former 3-time NCAA champion Shamir Little in a blazing 1:25.16. That's faster than Athing Mu's collegiate record of 1:25.80, and makes her the 7th fastest American woman and the 10th fastest woman in the world ever. We've also got Talitha Diggs of Florida and Matthew Boling, who both moved up on the all-time collegiate list in the 300 meters. Diggs won the women's 300 in 36:12, which ties her with Sydney McLaughlin for 3rd fastest in collegiate history. Boling won his race in 32:40, making him the 3rd fastest in collegiate history. And then, of course, we've got to throw some kudos to the field events as well. Jasmine Moore added to her list of 47-foot triple jump efforts, spanning 47 feet, 4.5 inches, which is 14.44 meters. And then she had 2 of those, winning the event in Clemson. Joe Wascom clocked a 2:18.77 at the Washington preview meet, good enough to move to number 3 on the all-time collegiate list on all tracks. And finally, Masai Russell grabbed a share of number 10 on the all-time collegiate 60-meter hurdles list by winning the Rod McCravey Memorial in 70.88 seconds. That is what took place on the collegiate scene. But at the same time, I did want to also highlight a couple of the high school performances. Shanti Jackson broke, which record was it, Kyle?
It was Sydney McLaughlin's 300-meter record.
Yep. And then we also got Nicholas Harbour, the big fella from who's a top NCAA collegiate recruit. He's got some pretty big schools after him in football. He's a big boy. He sat down with us at the New Balance Outdoor Nationals, and we're hoping we could catch him at New Balance Indoor Nationals this year. But he also clocked a pretty fast 300. So I'm here for these fast sprint times. What was the most impressive performance of the weekend for you, Kyle? I think I know where you're going with this one.
I mean, look, Britton Wilson is good. She probably had like the best pandemic I can imagine, because going into it, she hadn't broken 52 seconds. And then we come out of it, and I think the first time she really came on our radar was at the outdoor SEC meet, when she ran 54 and 53 in the 400 hurdles to win both rounds. I was like, all right, Britton Wilson, someone to pay attention to. Then outdoors, we get into it. She runs, she makes the world championship team, and then ultimately finishes 5th at the world championships. And she has the 2nd fastest split on the US, winning 4x4, only behind Sydney. It's just Britton Wilson now she's a 600 runner. And I mean, I saw the tweets come through. Britton Wilson, NCAA record. She breaks Athing Mu's record, which, obviously we just heard a Sydney record was broken by Shanti Jackson. Now Sydney McLaughlin, whose record you're breaking seems relevant. And I didn't even realize until like an hour later when I hopped and like onto YouTube and watched the race that she hadn't even won, because Shamir Little ran 1:24.6.
Yeah. We're going to get to Shamir a little bit more later on, but I mean, a fantastic performance by Britton Wilson. We're trying to get her on Out of the Blocks, so stay tuned if we make some progress there. But I think, again, to your point, like, this obviously puts dare I say, Sydney McLaughlin's outdoor hurdles record, like in the crosshairs, like potentially down the road.
The NCAA record.
The NCAA record. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
100%. So, yeah, it is kind of crazy. Does it make you sort of think that? No, I think like someone like Athing Mu and Sydney McLaughlin going pro early from college, like they're like, all right, they made their money, they made their mark in college, that they don't have any regrets. Records were meant to be broken, and so, but had they stuck around for all 4 years, who knows? Who knows how much faster some of these records would have been? Because like if we're seeing what they're running now,
I have my hot take of the week. Britton Wilson will one day beat Sydney McLaughlin over a 400-meter hurdle race. And I don't think
that's a hot take. Yeah,
it is hot.
Maybe
you left the speechless there because I was like,
maybe it's in the Olympics, maybe it's an early season meet, maybe it's in 8 years. But the thing that for Britton, to me, that demonstrates her potential in the 400 hurdles is that she can split 48 and she can run 125. Like you have the raw speed and you have the strength. Like she has sub 52 second 400 hurdles ability. And one day, maybe it's at a nothing meet, maybe it's on the biggest stage. One day she will beat Sydney McLaughlin in a race.
What does the 600 translate to for an 800? Like we're so quick to throw her over hurdles again because she's done it before, but doesn't your distance runner inside of you kind of get excited by like what she could run for 800?
Yeah, I mean, she's not going to run 155. But you know, I think if she was training for it, that she'd give sub 2 a very good scare.
This is a little inside CITIUS mag that I probably could have saved to the end, but I just came back from Vegas this past weekend, and we were spending some time around a couple sprinters, and Dalilah Muhammad was one of them, and I had her recap just what Worlds was like. We're gonna have some clips that we can share later on once I publish that podcast in the coming weeks, but she looks into the camera at the very end and says, "I want to run the 800." Like,
what does she run in practice? She's apparently run like 201 or something in practice.
202, I think, or like, yeah, or it's like somewhere between. Like, yeah, it's not anything that's overly crazy. I think I brought up the example to her. I was like, Brandon Johnson, 2013, like 400-meter hurdler who ended up running 143 for 800. Like, there's the two events. Like, there's some crossover there. So I don't know, like I'd love to see Britton Wilson in 800, but again, let's enjoy her for what her specialty distances are. So, David, what is the performance that really wowed you this past weekend?
I feel like Kyle really took the words out of my mouth with Britton Wilson, but one of the ones that stood out for me is Abby Steiner just opening it up with a 400. I think for a couple reasons. The first being that, if I'm Abby Steiner and I raced 1,000 times last year from December through August or whatever crazy thing she did, I would use my first season as a pro to be like, I will see you guys in May. So the fact that she's still out here, throwing down in even longer than like her specialty distance this early in the season, just deserves major kudos. And she ran fast too. She ran 51 high, which is pretty speedy for January, pretty speedy for indoor. And talk about somebody who, really could show some serious range, moving forward. Like there's got to be some sort of like meeting of the minds where Abby and Sydney and Dalilah and Britton and everybody else just like get together before USA's and it's like, all right, what's everybody running? Because we got to spread out some of the talent, or all race each other, but that might not be the best for the US team. But I mean, clearly she's somebody who just loves to race, loves to get out there and compete, and certain athletes thrive on that. So the fact that we're seeing her so earlier in the year is just super exciting from a fan perspective, but also is just great to see, like, in terms of pros, like not being afraid to just get out there and race.
She's got the 300 coming up at Millrose Games. That's going to be absolutely must watch. The world record in that has stood since 1993. I don't know if it's a world record or world best, but we're calling it world records here. 35:45. It stood since 1993 by Irina Privalova of Russia. So Yeah, I'm excited for that one. So my performance of the week, I'm going to go on the high school side of things and give it to my boy, Nicholas Harbor. I mean, to a big boy running 33.9 for 300, like just, I think the best part about watching him race is when he gets put on the lanes that have a little bit of the downhill, like that much force and momentum coming down that hill, it adds up. And that's what leads to some of these fast times. So,
Chris, back to that Virginia showcase meet. The 300 for Shanti Jackson setting the national record, obviously very impressive. But the 500 versus Sophia Guriant, I mean, she lost. Sophia, I think, was still like number 7 all time, maybe even higher. But Shanti had a full 2-second lead after 200 meters because she ran it like she's the 50-meter national champion or national record holder.
You stole it for me. That's my buy of the week.
That was your buy?
My buy of the week is that race in particular, because like, how did the high schoolers figure out that matching 2 stars from like 2 different disciplines or specialties, where it's like the middle distance star versus the short sprint star, like 500 meters, let's see them go head to head, and it paid off, and it was thrilling. The race video is up on YouTube. You can find it if you just search Sophia Goriaran versus Shanti Jackson, and it's great. Like, I want more of that, hopefully on the professional side of things, like whatever that might be, you know. So that was my buy. We'll come back to, we'll get your guys later on. So that's a quick recap of all the NCAA track action. Let's talk really quick. We last week we talked about how we love celebrating athlete signings and the team shifts and moves. We've got Marc Scott, British Olympian, announced in December that he's leaving the Bowerman Track Club after 5 years with the team. He had tons of high points with a 12:57 European record in the indoor 5K, world indoor bronze medal at 3K. Couple low points where he finished 12th in the 10K at the European Championships. But, he's shifted gears now, changed agencies, and he's going to be pretty focused on the roads going forward with a potential marathon debut this spring. Hasn't announced where it's going to take place yet. He will be, now that he's switching teams, he will be in the NN running team kit, because now he is represented by Global Sports, the same squad that Eliud Kipchoge, Kenenisa Bekele, Joshua Cheptegei rep during races. So Marc Scott moving and spending some time between the UK and Kenya to train under coach Patrick Sang. David, what did you make of this move when it was announced?
I mean, I was pretty surprised he was so sort of down on the track. Like, I think especially for someone like him, where he doesn't necessarily have to compete in terms of as big a field to make teams. He's consistently been one of the top 3 guys in the 5K, 10K for Great Britain. You would think you'd want to kind of leg out this run of global championships over the next 3-4 years before you make the move to the roads. So, if anything, I think it speaks to the fact that especially the Bowerman folks are so focused on medals, and that, maybe in terms of his personal goal setting, like just making teams isn't cutting it anymore. And he his frustration comes from not contending for medals, and that could be sort of the logic. But I was pretty, taken aback by it. Like, I would not have him pegged as one of those guys that I'm like, oh man, give it up, hang up the spikes and pick up a pair of Vaporflies. Like, he's definitely not in that category in my mind. So cool to see him kind of like moving because he wants to, not because he has to.
Well, David, if you had the opportunity to train with Eliud Kipchoge, even for just a day, would you not take advantage of it? And that, I think for him specifically, just the changes that happen at Bowerman with the shift to Eugene, it sounds like he's not super interested in doing that.
What?
I know.
Well, now that
Wild Duck closed.
That was what sent him over the top. He had his lease almost signed, and then he saw the Wild Duck close, and he said, "No, I'm off to Kenya now."
But it also sounds like his visa was expiring, and I don't know. Like, you have only so many opportunities to be at this age, and just having the opportunity to travel the world, training with the best, racing everywhere. Like, I also just think if you've done the Bowerman thing for a few years, like, it just makes sense to try different coaches. And I think that's something that, I wrote about it in the lab count this week, but you adapt to the different variables that coaches are presenting to you. And if you've done that workout for 3 years in a row, then it's like your body knows what to expect, and it doesn't get the same infusion of fitness that it maybe previously did. And, Patrick Sain's workouts are probably going to be much different than Jerry Schumacher's. And that's the sort of thing where you have to keep the body guessing. And for that reason, I think most athletes should probably make a major shift in some way after every 3-4 years. 2023, a better year to do it than 2024.
Yeah.
And also, I just looked up his age. He's 29. And that's young enough that you've got, hopefully sort of multiple phases of your career still ahead of you. So if he moves to Kenya and like it sucks, it doesn't work for him, he gives it 2 years and it's just not working out, he can always, move back to the track, move to a different training setup. There's so many options, that you're not necessarily making a one decision that's going to define the next decade of your pro career.
I like how in the lap count you did bring up the fact that it's sort of like, and Scott Fauble has kind of talked about this, how you as a professional runner envision yourself in one uniform for your whole career. And then for us Yankee fans, like that was Derek Jeter, like wore the Yankee uniform the entire time. And that's how it's supposed to be for all the sports stars. But in reality, like nowadays, like it's really rare to have that one athlete spend, 20 years in the same uniform. Kyle, if you were to do it all over again, I know Gags pressed loyalty on you just constantly. What team would you have gone to, or like, was there anything that you would have loved to have switched up?
Yeah, well, I guess it should first be noted that after, I think after 2016 into 2017, I started having Tommy Nohilly as probably my main point of contact. That was partially due to like the number of injuries I was having, and Tommy having, the background working, with physio stuff. And, that was kind of a natural transition in which Tommy became the main person that I was working with on a day-to-day, with Gags then shifting into a little bit more of a like overseeing and advising role. So like we did make that change and adjustment within my own career. In general, if I was just an athlete today, we're just thrown out there, I would never leave New York. But I feel like OAC's hot right now, right? Like I would try to join it.
Buy on stock.
I mean, those guys, here's my thing with the on guys and girls is just their, like when they're going for a warm-up jog in that like apparel, they just look so elite.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say like they have to get ready for being mobbed at Millrose games or anything like that.
I mean, maybe, but I just think like they just look fast.
I thought you were gonna say like if I were to go back and do it all over again, I would go to Newbury Park.
Get some more eligibility. Bring it back. AP Chem Part 2.
If I I think also part of it, first of all, I took it personally reading the lap count this morning because I just hit a decade with my coach, and I was like, wow, is this subliminal messaging for me? But I also, one thing that's kept it fresh for me having such a long relationship is like, I focused on steeple in college, and then I focused on the 1500 and 5K for a couple of years after that. And then like, when I was feeling really burnt out, like moving to the longer distances and the roads was like a real sort of jolt to energy for me. So like I'd be interested to know from Marc if like the idea to change came from like, did the desire to change events start before the desire to change groups, or like did those two sort of arrive in concert with one another? Because they're kind of two different things, but they're also the same in some ways.
Yeah.
David, how much money are you making? Maybe if you would like to make more money, it's time to change coaches.
Yeah, all the money that I'm currently making from my personal running career is really justifying my decisions.
Speaking of coaching, like I wrote this down as just a mental thought I had recently, because a couple people just randomly have asked me if I would ever consider coaching. And I was like, no, have you seen one of my PRs? Yeah. And I wrote this down. I got my thoughts in order about this. As like, me giving out coaching or any sort of running advice to people is like a parking attendant or a janitor at a hospital declaring that a patient is dead. Sure, he works at a hospital. Sure, I work at running, but I certainly don't have the authority to say some things with such certainty.
Every now and then, Chris, you'll text Mac and I a question about something that is just like, how does Chris not know this? And it's just like, he didn't run like Division I cross country and track or run professionally. So I guess he doesn't know. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago telling you that you don't have to warm up for like 30 minutes before a mile race when it's 95 degrees out.
Yeah.
I would also say that, like, my hot take, which I don't even know if it's a hot take, is that being a successful runner has very little to do with being a successful coach. And I think that there are skill sets that are totally unrelated from your running accomplishments that are needed to be a coach. And I think it is easier to learn training theory than it is to learn patience and empathy and understanding and like communication skills. So I always kind of come from the perspective of like people are always like, you know, oh, I'm starting a coaching business, blah, blah, blah. And I just think to myself, I'm like, I do not have the patience to ever work with athletes as a coach. Like, I would be the most harsh, like least sympathetic coach in the world. And like, that to me is like the ability to nurture and support is like just like the prime skill set for successful coaching. And I don't know if it's one that I could utilize effectively.
I just like comparing myself to like the parking attendant at a hospital.
David, as you're describing your lack of empathy for other people, I'm just thinking about Zach. I'm just like, poor Zach. So it gets no empathy from you.
No, I think that like I'm good, like I would say I am an empathetic person overall, but like
as a coach,
when it comes to running, because like especially with my personal running, like I'm like very like negative, like very like harsh on myself, like my like tendency is to overtrain versus undertrain. So I can just totally see myself, like if I were to be a coach, being the coach that's like, oh no, like you're just being soft, like just go out there, I don't care if you think you have a stress fracture, which is like terrible strategy as a coach.
All right. Let's move on to the next topic. A little bit of Millrose hype for people. Let's keep this going strong week after week. Let's reveal to you guys the women's 600-meter field. I think we've got a world record attempt. I have it.
Is it about to be official?
It's about to be official. By the time this podcast gets posted, I think it will have been released. But the women's 600-meter field at the Millrose Games is headlined by reigning world and Olympic champion at the 800 meters, Athing Mu, who also holds the outdoor American record of 1:55.04 for 800 meters. She has won every single race she's competed in since March 2021, except for the Millrose Games mile, which she dropped out of last year. I just caught that. Doesn't count. Also in the field, Natoya Gould, two-time Olympian 800 meters, holds the Jamaican indoor and outdoor record. Shamir Little, who we mentioned, just ran that fast time. Olivia Baker, world indoor qualifier, and Sophia Gorioran, the high school standout, which I believe, I just looked this up, the high school record is not soft. It is 1:23.57 from when Athing Mu won USA's as a high schooler in 2019. But one heck of a field.
You don't remember that race? I remember that because I was there. It was 29 USA's at Staten Island, and like that was the first I'd ever heard of Athing Mu. Like, that was when she took down Ajay, and that was like her arrival on the scene.
Is there any other high school national record that's faster than the NCAA record?
Oh, that's a good question. I just picked up on that. Yeah,
I doubt it.
Yeah, that might be it. But Sophia's number 2 on the high school list, 1:27. So she's got to chop, what is that, 5 seconds?
Yeah. 4 seconds and change. I think the interesting question for you guys is not pick the winner, because I feel like the smart money would be on Mo. But if Mo doesn't win, who are you picking from that field to win?
Natoya Gould. I think she had a great, strong season last year. That she was on fire during indoors and looked like a medal threat at the World Indoor Championships. So, you know, I think I would pick Gould over Baker. But Shamir, Kyle's an Atlanta Track Club guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, Shamir just ran 1:24, so you know, what else does she have in her? My upset pick is maybe one of the two people who are currently not in the field. Could we see a late entrance from Ajay or Raven? Those are two potentially excellent 600-meter runners, but absent from this one. I mean, I think a thing might just run 122 flat and it'd be the end of it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, having Gould in the field will hopefully be good, like, and Little too, as like a sprinter moving up, like having somebody to take it out hot for Mo to hopefully chase.
Just for a note, the all-time best in the should be record in the women's 600 is 121 outdoors by Caster Semenya. She's run that twice, and then Ajay Wilson ran 122 in Berlin back in 2017. Super fast race back then. All right,
Kyle, what's the fastest 600 you ever run?
I think I ran like 118 flat in practice. Ooh. But I probably went out harder in a 800 split at one point in my life.
That's moving. I would not have guessed it was that fast.
I was low key quicker than you think. I probably should have leaned into that rather than trying to run 90 miles a week in singles, but that's a different day to talk about.
Story for another day.
All right, really quick. This weekend, we've got some spots on the World Championship team on the line for World Cross. It is the U.S. Cross Country Championships taking place in Richmond, Virginia at Pole Green Park. It's this Saturday, I believe. Not a whole lot of press around this one, so let's give it some love. It took me a while to dig up the entries here. On the men's side, it's looking like we've got a lot of U.S. Army presence, which, like, it would not shock me one bit if we do have, you know, a really close battle between the likes of like Bernard Keeter and who else is in here? Sam Chalenga. It's the type of guys that we saw run head to head constantly last year on the U.S. road racing circuit. So no difference here, but some other strong presence. Tin Man Elite is fielding a squad, I believe. Who else is
Eric
out there?
Jenkins, intriguing name on that list.
Eric Jenkins is another one.
Lenny Career and both Boers are on the list, so those guys will definitely be a factor for the win. But
yeah, I do just want to call out. I mean, the 2019 team had both Boers, Lenny, Shadrack, and Kabene, and then Mason was our sixth man. But this could be the U.S. Army show again. And when I'm looking, you know, specifically right now on the men's side, I often try to think of like who's actually our best team that we can send. You know, of course you want the underdogs and like the first time qualifiers, but at a race like World Cross, which is so unique and so competitive and like, you know, probably different than any other cross country race than a lot of these athletes have ever run before. You do want people who have that experience there. And so one guy who I'm rooting for, he's on a great trajectory right now, is Sam Chalenga, because he was 11th in 2017. Like this, he's proven that he can do it. Then a guy like Lenny, who's made a couple teams before, the Boers, like these guys who are not going to get swallowed up and, you know, thrown by the fastest first K of a race of their lives. Those are the guys that you want to make the team. But then my dark horse pick,
Bia Simbasa.
No, I would say Bia is not a dark horse, but he's a very good choice to potentially make it and win. Is Andrew Colley.
He's looked good. He's healthy again.
Yeah, he was under the old Manchester record. He was fourth there. But he's back. He's healthy. He's running really well. I mean, he's had more injuries than anyone I can ever think of. But he made the team in 2015. He was a 7th at NCAA Cross many moons ago. And he's just one guy who I think would be a really strong feel-good story if he were to make the team. You know, he's probably had a dozen surgeries since the last time he was on it.
My dark horse, because I think folks will yell at us if we don't mention him, is Dylan Maggard. He made the world indoor team last year, so clearly he's good at being sharp this time of year, and he had such a great 2022 that, you know, it's hard to bet against him, you know, going into 2023, keeping that momentum going.
Is it a little crazy to say, like, I'm more intrigued by how strong of a field the U.S. sends on the U20 side of things. We got both the Young brothers. You got Cole Matheson also running in this one. You got, I believe, one or both of the Sherry brothers as well. Like, it could be an all-time U.S. U20 squad that they're sending.
Yeah,
That'll be good. If for no other reason than like if these guys are who are sending to worlds, 5-10 years from now, like practice that US to Australia flight now. Get used to the racing on the travel.
Yeah. All right. Women's side, it's looking like this one, the Winnie Colati show. Is that what we're tuning in for? David, you took a look at some of the entries beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, people like Ali Bahalski and Edna Kurgat could factor in, but Winnie's just been on such an insane level right now that you'd be insane to bet against her unless she literally took her like 2 weeks off yesterday. I don't know where she's at in her training cycle, but anytime she toes the line, especially for roads or cross country, she's a good bet. And she's my pick for the weekend.
Some dark horse.
Oh, who you got?
I'm gonna sip the victory lap Kool-Aid here. I'm gonna go Jessa Hansen. I think
yeah. I don't know if she's gonna win, but I do think she's very
not to win, to make the team potentially.
Unsponsored Verde Track Club. She was second behind Winnie Colati at Manchester. Just on the up and up right now. I was definitely gonna throw her out. Some other names: Steph Bruce, out of retirement or never retired. Ali Bukowski, sub 15 for the Beast. Another athlete who I really like as like a redemption arc is Emily Durgan. She did not have the marathon that she wanted to have, and she's back. So she's someone who I definitely think can do well. Bethany has had a great US cross. I would say that, going through the field, a lot of the big name stars, like we don't see Bowerman here, but we see a lot of people who have been running very strong, very consistently. Susanna Sullivan, who just ran like a 1K, a marathoner running a 1K during the indoor track season. That's quite fun.
Laura Sweet, another name to throw in there.
Yeah, I think this is a huge opportunity for a lot of people who, maybe don't necessarily have the opportunity to make the world or Olympic team in the outdoor season, but not everyone wants to go to Australia, and
some people do.
Yeah, but there's no shortage of depth in the US, and so this is an opportunity for a lot of athletes who maybe haven't really seen the world stage as regularly as others to step up and experience it.
On the junior side, we've got the clash between the Foot Locker champ and the NXN champ. It's Irene Riggs versus Carrie Beloga, which I think should be really awesome to see. I guess hopefully this is something we could cultivate a little bit more of. It's like, yes, we do have, the major brand nationals, the Nike nationals, New Balance nationals, Adidas nationals. Every single brand has a nationals. But like, what about just competing at your US U20 championship? Like, there's definitely teams to make there. A trip to Colombia was on the line last year. More of that, like more of the top high school stars and the young college stars, because some of them still fall under the U20 mark, showing up at these championships and like really making it worth something. Because then, you do get some of that international experience that is valuable later on down the road, picking up on how some of the East Africans run in the races, what it's like to get in the blocks against the Jamaicans in the sprints. So more of that, hopefully.
And a lot of the West Coast kids don't have high school indoor seasons too. So, you got that big gap in the schedule, at least for your high school team. If you're not headed to Millrose, why not hit up US Cross and see how you do?
All right, let's move into our buy or sell segment. I already said that I'm buying the Sophia Goriaran versus the Shanti Jackson race. Kyle, what are you buying?
I'm buying the story of the week that I hadn't, the story for me this week, and that's of Owet Baraki. I hope I pronounced that correct. But he is at Adams State. He's a senior at 62.40 to qualify for the Olympic trials in the middle of his indoor season. And I linked to it in the lap count. It was a story about his life from his time when he was at Stephen F. Austin. But, he's originally from Eritrea, and he was kidnapped as a young teenager, and the journey that he went on to now be in the US and, you know, qualified for the Olympic trials is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard and read and experienced. Like, I was having chills throughout reading this. So the fact that a guy like him is now going to be vying for a US team is super exciting. And I mean, it's not like he's no slouch. He's run, you know, 13:30s and I think 28:12 for 10K, and he just keeps getting better and better.
I think, should I have him on the pod? I think it's worth reaching out and seeing.
Dude,
yeah.
I mean, you read the story, right? Like, it was unbelievable.
Crazy.
Yeah. Really well written too.
Mm-hmm. David, what are you buying?
I'm buying very nice track club stock, man. I am as CITIUS folks will know internally, a bit of a hater on running YouTube content in general, and I had such a good time with the CITIUS videos that Xavier did with them this weekend or last weekend, whenever it was. They just have like such a good vibe. Like, it reminds me a lot of like Tin Man when they got on the scene initially, or you know, some of the early new gen videos. Like, they seem really fun. They seem to really enjoy the sport and have that kind of ability to not take yourself too seriously while you're doing it. And guys, you know, especially like Morgan Beadlescombe and Hobbs Kessler and Ben Flanagan, that, you know, have so much upside potential in my mind to really, you know, find their footing on the pro scene. I'm very excited to see sort of where that team goes as it grows, you know, adding in those sort of veteran presences with Eric Avila and Charlie Grice. I think will be really good for those guys that are kind of really in their first 1 or 2 seasons as a pro. So I'm all in, baby. Sign me up.
All right, let's get you some merch. What are you selling? We'll go to David first on this one.
Oh, what am I selling?
I thought you were gonna sell Paris Hilton. You were pretty critical of her in the group chat.
There was some heavy editing of the Facetune content. I don't, you know, I don't want to, you know, be too much of a hater on this is a controversial topic, but I'm selling the 1K. I'm a little tired of the off distances. I don't know what it is, because I like the 300, I like the 600. I feel like it makes like a fun sort of little bit of like an intrigue to the indoor season, but like the 800 and the mile are such like quintessential like distances, like, and you don't get to do the mile outdoors because you're doing the 1500. So like the 1K just feels like this weird, like, you know, like a vestigial organ of like how we used to do track. And I feel like I see Kyle getting riled up to,
such an American
to defend the 1,000 meters right now.
Down with the
like,
kilometer.
No, I just like, it dilutes the talent out of, you know, a lot of the, you know, fast miles, fast 800s for most of the season, and then they don't have it at NCAA, so it's like, what's the point? So I'm selling the 1K, baby.
I just love the fact that you preface this thing by being like, it's so controversial and like it's tearing
people
will
get
apart.
mad,
and I was
especially
like,
the HEPS middle distance audience, which is, you know, Kyle and my target demo. I will hear about this. This will be, you know, on the Let's Run message boards or something.
I just thought it was going to go like Sam Bankman-Fried or like classified documents. And then the sentence ends with like the 1K.
No, that's what gets the people going. That'll be a debate on some college team's long run this weekend that I am glad to fuel.
All right, Kyle, what are you selling?
I want to sell the fact that another European cross country meet happened and no Americans were at the Cinque Mellini in Italy, but I won't sell that. Instead, I will sell Usain Bolt getting scammed out from a fraudulent investment firm of $10 million of his retirement account. The only track athlete to ever make $10 million. We can't have nice things, apparently, because when we get them, we lose them. And
invested in CITIUS, Mac. That stock is going nowhere but up.
So I expect a comeback. I think more than a few companies would be willing to spend.
No, we're gonna, you know, the sad reality is we're gonna see him on what's the app, Cameo, We're gonna be able to get custom Usain Bolt videos. So we can have him promote Olipop via Cameo.
Oh man. All right, that was a good one. I'm gonna sell the World Athletics global calendar because one, it's
explain it a little.
I have to explain this. Yeah. So if you were to go look at the top times from this past weekend, there were some world leading marks that were set, but it doesn't reflect it on some of the World Athletics top charts right now because World Athletics is apparently only including marks made on global tour events that are listed on their calendar. So, for example, this is one example I saw thrown out on Twitter. In the 60 meters, Ismail Kone ran 6.51 seconds for the 60, but in the World Athletics top list, Yannick Wolf of Germany is listed there at 6.60 seconds because I think Wolf did it at one of the meets that is on the calendar. So I saw some clarification from Becca Peters on Twitter saying that they will only include meets added to the global calendar. Each federation is responsible for either adding meets to the calendar or approving meet directors to add their own meets to the calendar. USATF has not yet told meet directors how to get their meets added. This is an important issue to look at over the next couple months. We just always constantly find a way to overcomplicate things in this sport. Like now to have to
gonna
explain
bite
to
my
people that
tongue.
they're
Gonna tap out of this.
That there are different calendars you have to watch. The only calendar that should matter to people is the CITIUS Mag calendar. And if your event is not listed in here, then it doesn't matter. So we've got every single event. We already sold out of these. So unfortunately.
Yeah, so why are you even pitching it at this point?
Well, I'm just showing it off at this point that it's a really well done
Getting ready
calendar.
for next year's calendar.
World Athletics should pay us to make their global calendar. We'll do it.
To decide, like, look, this is how it works, fans. This is January. You got Kira D'Amato in Houston. And then all the important stuff is listed on here. So it says U.S. Cross Country Championships for this weekend. BU Terrier the following weekend. Dr. Sanders. These should be the only meets that matter.
I'm trying to figure out the long play here. Here's
I feel like I'm going to get in trouble.
I don't hate the global calendar thing. And I think that you need to give everyone probably a little bit more runway than they did. But look, if I go out and I score a basket on my local court, it's not like it's showing up in the NBA stat line. And I feel like the professional track and field circuit can use a little bit of professionalism here. And not every meet is a professional meet, and that's fine.
But the NBA isn't saying we're not going to report Celtics results unless they put their home games in the calendar.
Yeah, but this is the equivalent, I don't know what an example is. Let's say, Chris, you just gave an example. But I don't know if the Arkansas meet is on the global calendar, but Shamir Little, she is the Celtics, and she just, had a scrimmage. It wasn't the game, and that's the equivalent. And I just think
so. It won't count until she runs at Millrose games.
Yeah, then that's if it's just the difference between playing a pickup game and playing in an actual NBA game. And look, you chose to run in a meet that is not on the global calendar. That is on you. If you want to play with kids at college meets, go play with kids at college meets, but then don't be upset when World Athletics isn't counting it in their meet series. I think it makes sense.
It makes sense. I'm just I'm selling it because it just overcomplicates things, and you've thrown things into a flux right now in the first 2 weeks of the season.
It's only overcomplicated because people continue to run in meets that are not part of the calendar. And if the rankings really matter and you want to get the top times and everything, then you'll start selecting meets differently.
This is a long-standing beef we have, and I know, but all I will say is one of the assets track and field has in terms of promoting the sport and making it accessible to a broader audience is the simplicity. And the fact that we can't get our heads out of our asses enough to be what was the fastest 60-meter run in the world this year? And there's not a single clear answer to that is insane. And I get the argument for a professional track and field league and the need to have a greater distinction. But the fact that we have, we were joking before about world best, world records. It's cut all that crap out. And just the thing people like about track is that who runs the fastest is normally a simple and clear answer.
I hear you, David, but I think the only thing that could make having 10,000 meets a year a little simpler is if we had less meets and we know where the athletes are actually competing and that all meets are being held to a certain standard. And it's just, I don't know, like right now it is a little bit of a free for all. We do have certain standards historically of like like if you run the fastest 600-meter time in the world in practice, it doesn't count. And now the truth is it's like practice is a college meet unless standards are raised and like you're playing by World Athletics rules. If you don't care about the World Athletics rules and like their rankings and whatnot, then that's fine. You can go do it. But I don't know. I think it's like a very painful first step for everyone, but hopefully in 10 years time that there's just a professional circuit and these are the 30 meets a year and that's the ones that everyone runs and no one goes to like these made up races and you can't just throw together a random pop-up meet that no one knows about, no one is going to watch and there's no stream and no results are actually ever reported. There's no drug testing. You can wear whatever shoes you want. Like it's just not professional. And I know my man, Michael Johnson out there is listening and would definitely agree with me.
All right. So you're buying what I'm selling right now. Okay. Inside CITIUS Mag, what else we got happening this week? I had Mike Smith on the podcast to the dismay of Coffee Club. I beat them to the punch. Now the race is on to see who can get Jakob Ingebrigtsen on the pod first. It also had Molly Huddle on the show. And then there's this episode. We've got a Out of the Blocks episode coming out on Friday. That is Jasmine and Caitlin talking about how they're getting ready for their own respective seasons and some news that Caitlin has to drop. I believe Dana Giordano is launching a newsletter this week, so stay tuned to her social channels to get the links to that. Kyle, this week in the lap count, what was the biggest thing that stuck out to you? You had an op-ed and you had the Marc Scott interview?
Yeah, every time that I finish the lap count, I get like 3 days of rest before I'm like, I have to write it again. So, yeah, we're enjoying those few days right now, and we'll be staying in tune with all the races that are happening this weekend. I mean, I think the biggest one is Iowa seems to have some big names going there, but it's relatively quiet week. The following BU and Dr. Sanders, things really start heating up. So.
And David will be at BU.
Yes, I will. Yeah, I was going to say, if anything, you should just brace yourself this weekend for a down week in track and field in hopes of the big races coming down the pipeline. But I'm sure as soon as I said that now, like somebody's going to break some insane record and I'm going to sound like an idiot. So I look forward to that. Hopefully it's at a meet that Kyle considers legitimate.
That is on the global calendar. All right. That does it. Yeah. That does it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week. And don't forget, drink your Olipop. CITIUS 25 at checkout, drinkolipop.com.